Hello friends, I'm Michael Kingswood. I write fiction for fun and profit. Before we get to today's show, we have to do one thing real quick, and that's a little spot from our sponsor. Fortunately enough, our sponsor is me. In a world of valor and magic, two soldiers flee from their past. An isolated mountain town suffers under the heel of a vicious band of brigands. An offer of redemption for the one, salvation for the other, but not without great risk to both. Action and adventure await in Glimmer Vale, the first book of the Glimmer Vale Chronicles. Get your copy today, wherever great books are sold. Hello friends, it's Saturday, which means it is Story Saturday here on Storytime. And I know what you've been thinking. You're thinking, Kingswood, I love these stories. Let's get to the next one as soon as we can. And I'm right there with you. I'm willing to read it. We're again going through the volume 2 of last year's project. This is a story called Wild Rose Compact. Wild Rose Compact is a supernatural mystery slash sort of horror-ish story. I wrote, as I'm reading back through these, like, okay, these sort of went in spurts on some of these, and last week's one was supernatural horror, and this is supernatural horror-ish, but it's also mystery-ish. So clearly I was in the mood last year at the time that I wrote these, and hey, we're in a mood now, a mood to have some fun, read some good stories, and enjoy. So I'm going to do that now. I'm reading it. I wrote it. It's awesome. You will like it, and I will talk to you on the other end. Sit back and enjoy. Low-pitched chanting. A chorus of male voices projecting a hauntingly majestic harmony in an ancient tongue that Bella recognized but could not name, greeted her as she pushed open the door and stepped out of the pouring rain that was flooding the streets of Maripol today. The forecast had called for rain, so she dressed in a light rain jacket and carried an umbrella, but she hadn't counted on the wind blowing it nearly parallel to the ground, so although she'd only had a short walk outdoors, she felt completely soaked. She breathed a sigh of relief when the door clicked shut behind her and took a moment to close the blue and white striped umbrella, shaking it once to fling most of the water off it onto the mats that had been laid out on the floor just inside. Then she unzipped her jacket, blue matching the blue of her umbrella, and ran her free hand through her hair, pushing the locks that were normally blonde but looked brown now from the wet back from her face. Across the room from the door where she had entered, a thin, elderly man with wispy white hair and a matching mustache, wearing thin, wire-rimmed spectacles that were pushed down low on his nose, looked up from where he had been studying a book that lay atop the counter separating himself from the rest of his store. He was dressed like an old-school English professor, in a brown tweed jacket with patched elbows, white-collared shirt, and a reddish-brown bow tie. And for a moment as he looked Bella over, she felt like she had been sent to the principal's office for some ghastly bit of misconduct or other. She realized she was squeezing the folded-up umbrella with both hands and forced herself to stop it, releasing it with her right hand. "Can I help you, young lady?" the old man said. And of course he had an English accent, the kind of Oxfordish accent that made it seem like its owner was a standard deviation or two more intelligent than everyone around him, whether he really was or not. Bella nodded and stepped forward, off the entrance mat, and for a second it felt like she was stepping into another world. The chanting, that had been merely in the background, grew louder, and seemed to draw her forward as much as she had moved herself. Old, antique-looking bookshelves, lining the walls on either side of the room, filled with dusty-looking tomes of all sizes, welcomed her in, promising escape into endless adventure and the lure of secrets, sacred and profane, that lurked buried, waiting to be discovered. On the wall behind the old man was a carved crucifix, a good 3 or 4 feet high, set next to a glyph of a crescent moon engulfing a star. Other symbols, arcane and scientific, obscure and common, hung up on the wall just below the ceiling all over the room. A whiff of incense on the air completed the effect. Mystery, magic, and knowledge forbidden, a mix of holiness and profanity, It all struck at Bella as she advanced, at once buoying her steps and shouting at her to shrink back, to flee. She resolutely did not start ringing the umbrella again. She kept her hands at her side and smiled as she stopped in front of the old man's counter. "I am looking for the Wild Rose Compact," she said, repeating the phrase the message board had recommended. The old man's eyebrows rose slightly and he straightened, closing the book he had been perusing. It was leather-bound, with no markings on the cover, and Bella saw ledger lines within in the instant before he closed it fully. His accounting ledger seemed a bit archaic in a time of spreadsheets and calculators, but then, considering the kind of place he had here, it went with the motif pretty well. "I'm not sure what you're referring to, young lady," the shopkeeper said. He had risen to his full height and made a good show of looking down at her through the spectacles that were still perched at the very end of his nose. Bella just looked at him for a few seconds, frustration and uncertainty battling within her for supremacy. The board had said that was the key phrase that would tell him it was safe to allow her access. For a second she considered that it was a thing she had read on the internet, and how stupid could she be to take it at face value? And yet she had dug deep, through layers of encryption and false IP addresses, into the depth of the dark web through portals she hadn't even known existed before she began her search. Maybe the feds knew about it. More than maybe, they almost certainly did. Before coming here, Bella had pondered that, considering the events of the last 10 or 15 years, it was more likely that the feds had set it up themselves to ensnare otherwise innocent people. They'd done it before, countless times, all in the name of showing results, getting budget increases, and assassinating political enemies. Figuratively, but maybe literally also. She mulled it over for a while and finally concluded that her quest might be the one semi-legal place in existence where the FBI didn't solve cases by being the instigators of the crimes they were investigating. Because who would really ever conceive of the mythological entities she was researching as being a means to obtain money or power? They'd been out of print, for lack of a better word, since before the birth, if indeed he'd ever actually been born, of Christ. All that flashed through her head for a second or so, and then she raised her eyebrows in mimicry of the old man's. Calmly, she repeated the next phrase in the cipher she'd learned from that message board, the one to be given only in the last duress, when no other admittance was feasible. "The ferryman swims for one man alone." The old man narrowed his eyes at her. His lips compressed for a long moment as he obviously took her measure fully. Then he nodded slightly and slid his left hand beneath the countertop. "In the private stacks," he said. A soft click issued from beneath the counter, and off to the right a section of wall that Bella could have sworn was solid swung open a few inches. She should not have been surprised. She'd read that places associated with the compact had secretive ways, but still, a secret door? Seriously? What was this, a speakeasy? But as she nodded thanks to the old man and walked over to the partly open portal, she considered that yes, this was a speakeasy, of the oldest and most elemental sort. It sent a shiver of excitement up her spine, and she found she was grinning slightly as she took hold of the door's edge and pulled it the rest of the way open, then stepped through. The corridor beyond was narrow enough that she would have to press against the wall to allow someone to walk out past her, and painted the kind of cream that reminded her of a dentist's office. It was lit by recessed lighting every 10 feet or so, and proceeded a good 50 feet straight ahead before ending at another closed door. As she made her way to the door, Bella wondered at the length of the building the store in front occupied. Was it even 50 feet from front to rear? She wasn't sure, but she had the nagging suspicion that no, it was not. So where was this corridor going, and why wasn't it getting run through by cars driving past on the street behind the shop's building? But still, as she stopped in front of the darkly stained, sturdy-looking door, knobless, in front of her, Bella felt a moment's hesitation. Perhaps she should just leave, go back home and forget this whole thing. It was just an idle curiosity, after all, and not worth any trouble or annoyance. And anyway, she had midterms to study for if she wanted to graduate in the spring, so why not? But as she glanced back over her shoulder, she saw two things. First, the door she had passed through was closed like the door ahead of her, except that there wasn't even the appearance of a door, just a smooth wall without blemish of any kind. And second, that the unbroken wall was maybe 10 or 15 feet behind her. Bella felt her jaw drop open. She surely had walked farther than that. But as she turned back to the closed door in front of her, it was just as close as when she had looked back. So she must not have gone as far as she thought. Obviously she had not. She'd just been carried away by her thoughts is all. Except that there was no way to go back. She couldn't even see a way to knock on the wall to get the shopkeeper to open up for her, except to use her fists. What in the hell was going on here? That desire to go back home fled before a growing panic that welled up from the deepest depths of Bella's being. What was this? What was she doing here? You came here yourself, you ninny, the rational part of her mind snapped back at her. The rest of her smacked the rational part. Hard. But it wouldn't go away. It came back fighting, tearing at her carnal part with nails that came away dripping blood. Bella shuddered, feeling the conflict within her and wanting to scream out against reason. But somehow, reason won out, and she squared her shoulders and turned back to face the closed, knobless door. There was no way back. She had best go forward, if she could. So she reached out to knock on the door. It opened before her hand could reach it, pushing soundlessly away from her and allowing entrance into a dimly lit room beyond. Bella took a deep breath and stepped within. The light was orange-yellow, coming from flickering candles dripping molten wax onto sconces set into the walls on either side. The ceiling was low enough that her very tall brother would have to stoop, though she could stand freely, and made of roughly hewn stone, as was the floor and the walls where the sconces were mounted. The room proceeded back a couple dozen feet to another counter, similar to the one the old man had been manning in the store, but older, obviously hand-carved, out of some sort of dark wood that was graying with age, and slightly warped so that the surface to Bella's right was lower than that on her left. A figure sat on a stool behind the counter, cloaked in black, or was it dark blue? It was hard to tell in the flickering light, with a cowl drawn so that Bella could not see its face, hunched over as it was. For a moment Bella looked at it, curiosity battling with a gnawing dread in her belly. But again reason shouted for command, and pointed out that she had no way back, so best try to talk to this person, whoever it was. "Hello," Bella said as she stepped toward the counter. The figure gave a little jerk, not like it was startled, but like it had been motionless for so long that any movement would take an effort and be halting, spasmodic. A crackling issued from the figure at the same time, and Bella had the recollection of stop-motion skeletons in an old adventure movie that creaked and rattled with every tiny motion of their decaying bodies. She half expected a skull to look out at her as the figure raised its head and its hands to push the cowl back. Instead, a beautiful young woman, with curly brown hair cut to her shoulders and healthily tanned skin smiled at her in greeting, with lips that glimmered nearly pure red. Candlelight glinted off brown-green eyes, making them seem to almost contain yellow as a result. "My father tells me you're here for the compact," the woman said in a deep alto that seemed to harmonize with itself almost the way the male chants had done in the storefront. "Your father?" "Of course, this is a family business, or hadn't you heard?" Her eyes flashed again, with amusement as much from the flickering of the light. Bella shrugged and looked back at the door, which, for a wonder, still stood open, for the moment. "I just didn't see the resemblance between you." The woman behind the counter laughed, drawing Bella's eyes back to herself. It was a long, drawn-out, deep laugh, containing mirth but also an underlying mockery in its tone. "Not him," she said as her laughter subsided. "That old fool couldn't make a child if he wanted to." Bella blinked, uncertain how to respond to that. The woman must have seen the expression of doubt because she raised an eyebrow. For a second, Bella thought she was going to resume her mockery, but instead she shrugged and settled back on her stool a bit. "Anyway, on to business." She clasped her hands in front of her belly. "You desire the knowledge of the compact." Bella nodded, unsure what else to say. "And are you prepared to pay?" Bella slipped her hand into the inside pocket of her rain jacket, where she had stashed her wallet. Good thing about rainy days, she had excuse not to carry a purse around with her. But when she pulled the wallet out to show the woman how it bulged with money Bella had stuffed into it last night, she shook her head derisively. "I want not your false money, girl," she said, scorn plain in her face. Bella stiffened in confusion. She just looked at the woman for a moment, unsure whether she was serious or just mocking again. But after a moment of looking into those eyes of green, brown, and yellow, and seeing nothing even hinting at humor there, she slipped her wallet back into the hidden pocket. Swallowing, she said, "Then what do you want?" The woman rolled her eyes. "You learned enough to know how to get to us, but you don't know our fee?" Incredulity ruled her voice, barely beating out the earlier scorn for dominance. Bella racked her brain, thinking of everything she had learned about the Wild Rose Compact during her research. It was not a thing she had intentionally sought, more like a mystery she had discovered while doing research on her thesis on comparative religion. A deeper source known only by legend and rumor that unified and explained all the various creation myths around the world, all the various heroes and gods the world over, turned it all into a single whole that would finally make sense of it all. The sort of thing Joseph Campbell attempted but only scratched the surface of, and apparently someone had done it thousands of years ago. Legend said it had been found and preserved by a select group, down through the ages, a group that was sworn to protect it and keep it secret. Sacred. Bella had wondered how that could be so, for if such a grand unifier actually existed, why keep it secret? Why not show it to the world and put an end to the interfaith strife and personal confusion and hopelessness in one fell swoop? The explanations she had found among the few academics who dared buck accepted orthodoxy and explore the tinfoil hat section of her field, into which the compact firmly fell, were all unsatisfying, trite copies of various fiction tropes. That left nothing but to find the compact and delve into its truths herself. Grand as the quest was, she wasn't the only one who had attempted it in the past, or was attempting it now, hence the message board on the dark web. But no one, not in the oldest documents she had been able to find or on the modern message board, had mentioned payment for access to the compact was to be anything except money. Slowly, Bella shook her head, focusing back on the woman behind the counter. "I do not know." The woman slid her tongue across the fronts of her teeth, as though tasting the air for a second. "Who told you how to come here?" "No one. The information was posted on a—" The woman rolled her eyes to the ceiling above her head. "Save me from modern conceits," she said, almost as though mouthing a prayer. After a moment she looked back at Bella. "And what did you think to find in the compact?" "Knowledge. Understanding." The woman nodded, but gestured for her to continue. Bella paused, then blurted out, "An answer to—" She waved at the room surrounding them both. "All of this. What's the point of it?" A deeper nod now. "You were not led astray in that sense. My father's compact reveals that and more." Her eyes flashed again in the candlelight. "Much more. But the kind of knowledge contained therein, knowledge of the infinite, cannot be bought with mere perishable trifles like gold or silver." "What then?" Again the tongue flicked across her lips and teeth. "Yourself, of course." That shiver of dread returned, much stronger. "What do you mean?" "My father's secret can be had, but he requires all from you in return. Your love, devotion, attention, and service. Your life, in other words." "For a book?" The woman laughed, even more scornfully than before. "Not a book, girl. Knowledge. Knowledge and power. Power such as you cannot dream." Bella took a half step away from the woman. "And who is your father, then?" She spread her arms to encompass the room more fully than Bella's little gesture a moment ago could have. "He is everything, and he is nothing. The infinite and the microscopic. Knowledge and oblivion. Power and weakness. Love and hate." She leaned forward, her eyes unblinking, as she stared through Bella into her very soul. "The bringer of light out of the darkness, the teacher of mysteries, and he will tell you all, if you will but devote yourself to him, and him alone." "But who is he?" "I have told you, now." She narrowed her eyes at Bella. "Will you pay?" Bella wanted to look away, but found she could not. The woman's eyes were piercing, entrancing, beautiful, and terrifying. But Bella could not flee either, partly because she knew it would be folly. The corridor back the way she came was blocked, but partly because beneath the terror of the woman's gaze, the beauty and the promise there yanked at Bella's soul. She wanted to be here, wanted to learn the promised truths. Wasn't that why she had come, after all? But at the same time, she shook her head. "I'm not paying for something without seeing it first, and I won't serve someone I've never met." The woman's lips turned upward ever so slightly, and she nodded. "Wise," she said, and the scorn was gone from her voice. "Turn around." As she spoke, the room began to light up with a bluish-white light, markedly different from the guttering flames of the candles. It was coming from behind, and even if she hadn't been bid to do so, Bella probably couldn't have helped but turn around to see what was casting such a light. The rear wall and door of the room had melted away, and now it was just light shining in at her. It was brighter than anything she had ever seen, yet she could look into it without difficulty or pain. There was nothing but light, but somehow there was also a form of some kind there. She could see vague shapes and geometries, perceive motion, though she could not tell what was moving. Music came with the light as well, subtle, harmonic, but in a less energetic way than the chanting in the storefront had been. Beautiful, but with a faint hint of dissonance that gave it a mournful quality that caressed Aunt Bella's inner being like a lover who had passed out of her life, but who she still remembered years later. Not quite melancholy, the pre-echoes of it. She had always loved sad songs. Was that why? Come forth, Bella. The words arpeggioed out of the light's music. Not spoken, but like their meaning had come straight to her mind from the song's melody. She couldn't not step forward. Didn't want to not. As she advanced, the light grew more bright and seemed to swell all around her, bathing her, covering her, and she felt a warmth that flooded through her entire being as that light and music flowed against and around and through her. It was bliss incarnate, until it wasn't. The shapes, the motions that she had seen before were swirling around her now, and though she couldn't make them out any better than before, they were taking up more and more of the space nearby, blocking the light somehow. Though there was no clear source of the light, it was just everywhere, all at once. And yet the movements and the shapes persisted, and each time they blocked a bit of the light, it felt like a blade of cold slicing through the warmth that had engulfed her. Closer and closer they came, and the slices became more frequent, until she began cringing backward. She turned, but there was no space behind, only the light and the movements. She tried to run, but seemed to get nowhere despite her exertions. And still the shapes and movements came closer, and she began to ascertain that when they had fully reached her, the light would be blotted out completely, and there would be nothing but the icy cuttings left. Bella felt a scream welling up within her, and she was about to let it out when the voice that was not a voice came again. "Do you see, as you wished to?" Words stuck in her throat as though locked there by the scream that seemed stuck in place by the voice's communication. She could only nod. "Now that we have been introduced, behold my offer." And the shapes and movements rushed to her, and in a twinkling of an eye all was cold, cutting darkness and infinitely stretching nothingness, then pinpricks of light, tiny at first, and then growing brighter as they separated and spread out, filling the eternity of dark that had been all just a heartbeat ago. And with them came a rebirth of warmth, and in some places, heat. Other shapes were swirling and forming as well, and Bella realized she was seeing the birth of star systems, entire galaxies, of the universe itself. The immensity, the breadth of it all took her mind, and stretched it so that she screamed at the exquisite agony of it. She was being stretched on the rack of the universe, or every iota of being drawn further and further apart from every other infinitesimal part, until she could not bear the glory of it. The agony. Then she stopped, and she was back in the empty light again, the shapes and movements swirling once more, but farther back, like when she had just noticed them. "You have seen," the voice said. "Now will you pay?" "Who are you? Are you God?" There was derision in the voice now. "There is no God. Not in the way you mean. I am the highest of the heavens, the only one worthy of glory to sit upon the throne. No usurper will unseat me, no lesser being will outshine me. Though I perish in the death throes of the universe, never will I bend to another. I am he who will reign." And Bella could not dispute the being's, whoever and whatever it was, claims. It was great and beautiful and glorious and everything else it had said of itself and more, and yet there was a vanity in the description, a boastfulness that seemed off somehow, a braggadocio that was misplaced. For if it really was the beginning and the end, the greatest of all things, why would it need to say so? A man who has to say, "I am the king," is no true king. Bella couldn't remember where she'd heard that line, but it always rung true. The lady doth protest too much, and reveals her weakness. This being, whatever and whoever it was deeply insecure in a way Bella couldn't comprehend, considering all that she had seen of it. But it struck at Bella, ringing like a warped bell that set an entire melody out of kilter and ruined the call to worship. Wasn't that what the thing was really asking for from her? To be worshipped? "I will give you all these things and more if only you will come and bow down and worship me." She remembered fully where she had heard that one. Icy dread flooded through Bella's body, worse than all the cold of the cutting of the shapes and the movements had been. They were the words of Satan to Jesus during his temptation in the desert, and though Bella had never given that story any credence before, now she felt its truth even as she saw nothing but beautiful but somehow also tainted. For what else were those objects and movements but taints, light all around her? The devil has the power to disguise himself as an angel of light, she remembered, and dread became outright fear. "Will you pay?" came the voice again, more insistent this time, and a force seemed to press onto her mind from all sides. It was clearly out of patience with her indecision and was now pressing the matter, but she knew, or at least she suspected, what it was now. She had never been a believer before. She could not claim that any more, and if she believed, she could not serve the deceiver. Bella shook her head and shouted out, "No!" The light ripped away, moving like waves away from her in all directions, leaving only blackness, but also the shapes and the movements all around her. She could see nothing, but she could see them, swirling around, gathering together, and then diving straight at her from all sides, and there was no escape. "No!" The old man behind the counter jerked back in his chair, his eyebrows rising in surprised shock at Bella's sudden shout of denial. "Wait, what?" Bella looked left and right, up and down, and she was back in the store again. The old man behind the counter, the ancient dark bookcases, the faint smell of incense. The only difference was the affronted look on the old man's face. "I don't appreciate your tone, young lady. I must ask you to leave immediately." Bella just gaped at him for a second. Her tone? What? "Oh, right. I'm sorry, I just leave, please, miss." He rose from his chair to his full height and pointed imperiously toward the door behind her. Bella nodded, unsure why she should argue the point anyway. She most definitely did not want to be there. Didn't want to go back down that corridor to the compact secret room. Didn't want to face... But as the door closed behind her and she turned right to hurry down the street the way she had come, oblivious to the downpour soaking her hair again immediately, and this time her blouse and pants as well, since she hadn't zipped her jacket closed yet, she had to wonder, had she even gone down that corridor at all? What had really happened? Was it a daydream of some kind? She turned back to look at the store and froze, uncertainty turning to sheer terror, worse than when the being, whatever it really had been, revealed itself. For the store she had been in, with its ancient tomes and glyphs of power, was not there. Just a flower shop, advertising a discount on half and full dozen bouquets of roses. Bella did scream. Then she turned and ran, and didn't intend to stop either until she reached home and had the door shut securely behind her. But could even that be a real refuge, she couldn't help but wonder. She ran, all the faster. All right, well, Bella escaped to deal with the devil. A deal that she didn't really realize that she was seeking, I guess. And, yeah, so, like I said, mysteries, esoteric knowledge, drawing people in. It's, cultish kind of stuff. Yeah, clearly not that, didn't diverge that far from the story from last week, so I guess, yeah, like I said, I was in a mood. I like this one, personally, a little bit better, just because there's more to it. I liked, Sebastian's Inferno just because of the exploration of his experience, but this goes a little more deep into her character and, what's going on, and I don't know, I like it a little more. I don't know, what do you think? Which one do you like more? Let me know. We got comments, we got emails, we got all kinds of ways to let me know. That'd be great. We are going to, of course, proceed next week with the next one. I'm just going to tell you what it is now. I just somehow in my head that was gonna come out much more eloquently than it did, and my segue there was really horrible. What can I say? I'm not the best speaker, but that's okay. So next week's story, which we're going to be doing right here on Storytime, is called Man Trap, and I don't remember what Man Trap was. Oh yeah. This one. This is a mystery, I believe. And it is, it's about something about an X. It's been a while since I read it. I was just leafing through it as I looked at it. It's like, what the heck is this? Yeah, it's a mystery / crime kind of thing, I believe. It's something about an X, and yeah, we'll figure it out next week when we read it. You will figure it out. I already know, even though I don't really fully remember, but you guys will learn it next week when we read it, right here on Story Saturday, where you're always supposed to be every Saturday. Now, I know what you're thinking there. You're thinking, hey, Kingswood, I love your stories. What can I do where can I buy them? And I was like, well, you're in luck, because there's multiple places. Everywhere I can manage to get my books up, I'm there. But the best place is go to my company's store, which is michaelkingswood.com/store. Every book I have, for the most part, is up there, and you can get them in the format you want, and you get directly to me and my company. No middleman. I make more profit. You have a direct relationship with the writer that you like. It's great. If you prefer to go through Amazon or Barnes & Noble or Kobo or iBooks or whatever, there's a million places you can find my stuff. Go to michaelkingswood.com/books to read the number 2. That will get you to a universal book link aggregator where you can click on the cover, title, and click on see where all the stores it's at, and you can pick which one you want and get it from there. And hey, that's cool too. I get money either way. I just get more if you come straight to me. Other things you can do to support the work. We are paralleling these stories on Substack. 2 for free every month, 2 for subscribers every month, and a 5th one every month for paid subscribers. Paid subscribers are, $5 a month. You get an extra story each month, and it's your way of showing that you like what I'm doing, whether here or, on Substack, similar thing going on, and, consider it a tip jar. The alternate tip jar, of course, is over at subscribestar.com/Michael Kingswood. Similar kind of setup. Few bucks a month. I think I put $5. Just say, hey, you appreciate what you're getting, and you get an extra story there too. It ends up being the same setup as the Substack, because I don't want to make things difficult on myself to remember what's going on. Let's see. No Kickstarter campaigns or anything coming up soon. We just finished one like a week ago, and I got a lot of work to do to get the goods delivered for that, because I got to write extra stories and finish formatting and doing all this stuff. It's going to be a bunch of work to get that squared away, but we are on it, and it's going to be fun. But after the new year, after we get everything out to these current set of backers, we are going to be moving on to other future projects. The Space Navy book will be done. I've got a couple more short fiction collections I'd like to put out, and another couple of books that I had been working on, a novel series that I started and then sort of stopped midway because I was kind of a slacker. Well, not really a slacker, I let myself get distracted, but I got to go back and finish that up. That'll be the project for early next year, and we'll get back to more campaigns for that. And then, of course, after that, got to go do another Glimmer Veil book, and then there will be another Space Navy book, and then other fun stuff coming forward. So we're always going to be churning out more work, always going to have more stories for you to read, more fun stories for you to read on the Substack or listen to here, and more books for you to buy. So definitely make sure that you have subscribed to this channel if you haven't already yet, that you liked it, you told all your friends, and that you get notifications, and that you go buy books. That's the purpose of this thing, is to have fun, but also sell books. So, hook a brother up. Alright, that's it. I've grifted enough for one day. I got more work to do, so I will see you next Saturday. Until then, don't do anything I wouldn't do.